Thank you. We could just reiterate. Could I just ask members of the audience, before the planning committee started, or when it started, I gave a little preamble introduction as to how this all works. Were you able to hear that next door?
Not really.
Right, in that case I'll give you a very hurried version of it. Just bear with me a minute and I'll take this together here. Okay, first here just confirm that the planning committee is made up of 9 elected members, borough councillors, who are supported here tonight by professional officers. On my far right is Mary Severin, the borough solicitor. Next to her is Colm O'Carvenig, who is the Democratic Services Officer and clerk to tonight's committee. On my immediate right is Councillor Tim Holton, who's the Vice Chairman. I'm Simon Weeks, I'm the Chairman. On my left is Claire Lawrence, who's the Head of Development Management. And next to her is Chris Easton, who's the Service Manager for Highways Development, to advise us on any transport or highways related issues. The Planning Committee is quasi-judicial. We have set procedures and a format, and I'll ask you to cooperate fully with that. I will call, after each presentation, only those people who are pre-registered to speak. They can come up and use the chair here and operate a little grey button, which gives you a microphone, which is then, when you're allotted time, you're available to speak. Please be sure to get your key points across in your 3 minutes. It's very disappointing if you're just getting into your flow and I then cut the sound off and we don't actually get to hear the relevant points. So please stick to that time. Obviously, everybody present and anybody interested in these applications has had usually at least 8 weeks to contribute their thoughts and views on this to the planners, so they will have all gone into the overall case file and will have been part of the evidence that is used to come up with the recommendation that is before us tonight. The members of the planning committee don't have to agree with that recommendation. If they're convinced there should be a different outcome, they're free to propose a different outcome and see whether the majority of the committee will support it. But finally, just a reminder that as the local planning authority, our role is to determine planning applications as they're submitted to us. Our role is not to attempt to redesign applications or get into what-if type situations. So we have planning applications, we have to consider those against existing national and local planning laws, and we have to take into consideration the professional officers who are here to advise us. So without further ado, we'll go straight on to the second item, which is number 79 Wiltshire Road, an application to demolish these 2 buildings and the erection of a block of 33 sheltered apartments in their place. And that will go straight across to Justin, who's going to present on this item. Then we'll hear from the registered speakers. Then the committee will debate it and try and reach a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The application site is 79 Wiltshire Road, and the site's close to the junction with Rectory Road. It currently contains 2 large detached dwellings with substantial gardens. The application is in full. It relates to the demolition of the existing dwellings on site and the erection of a block of 33 sheltered apartments for the elderly. That's 14 one-bed units and 19 two-bed units. The development also includes communal facilities, including an owner's lounge, parking, including a basement car park, and landscape gardens. It's come before committee as a major development. The proposed building would form a 2.5-storey T-shape, although as viewed from the street it would appear as 3 distinct sections consisting of 2 blocks at the front and a middle block further back, linked by a single-storey glazed element. Along Wiltshire Road, and to a lesser extent Rectory Road, the original character, which consisted of large detached dwellings in spacious grounds, has over time been replaced by flatter developments, albeit still set in generous grounds. Apart from the application site, there is a series of modern flats for approximately 100 metres north of the site and about 90 metres south. As such, the site is currently somewhat out of character with the rest of the street, and the principle of flatter development is considered to be appropriate. The flat blocks to the north at Wiltshire Place, which you can see in the photo, are 2.5 storeys high, and they vary between approximately 15 and 20 metres in width, and projecting bays and gables. That serves to reduce the overall mass of those buildings. The proposed blocks at the front of the site proposed measure 15 metres in width and continue this theme of projecting bays and gables to reduce their mass. The overall height of the development, 11.5 metres, is slightly more than the Wiltshire Place development, which is about 10.5 metres, although that's not significant in the street scene, given the spaciousness of the development and the gap between the buildings. The two blocks fronting the site would be set back from the street by about 14 and 22 metres, and they'd be behind trees and a landscape frontage. That further serves to reduce the impact of the development on the street scene, and is in keeping with the setback of the flats at Wiltshire Place that you can see in the photo, and is actually a more generous setback than the Danesfield and Pickett's Place flats to the south. The proposed rear block would be set back about 30 metres from the street. The applicants proposed traditional design features, such as the use of sash windows and brick and render for the external finish. That's in keeping with the existing development at Wiltshire Place, albeit the submitted details indicate that the scheme would be of a higher quality. A back-to-back separation distance of 30 metres is required by the Borough Design Guide. The closest residential development to the proposed buildings are 43 metres to the east, that's along Coronation Square, and 47 metres to the south along Norreys Avenue. And the proposed building will therefore have a significantly greater separation distance than stated in guidance. Although the properties along this section of Norreys Avenue have significant rear gardens, it's considered appropriate to include a condition to ensure that the first and second floor windows in the development are obscure glazed. The submissions demonstrate that the shelter departments would have access to a good quality amenity space, and the national space standards for all flat sizes are exceeded. The existing dwellings generate around 12 person trips per day. The proposed use would generate around 56 per day. It's a significant increase, however, it's spread throughout the day, and it wouldn't significantly affect peak hour movements or the capacity of the Wiltshire Road, Rectory Road junction. The existing access to number 7 Wiltshire Road would be blocked up, the access to number 9 upgraded to accommodate the development. Visibility to the north, i.e. the right, for vehicles leaving the site is not ideal, given the slight bend in the road before the access. However, the Council's highway officer confirms that adequate visibility is provided, and in any event, vehicles are slowing as they approach the junction, so it's not a dangerous manoeuvre. Visibility from the south is acceptable. The application proposes the provision of 21 parking spaces in an underground car park, along with 4 spaces at the front of the building. Research carried out on similar developments indicates that a proposal of this size requires a total of 15 spaces when fully operational. The surface spaces are proposed for visitors and disabled parking. It's considered that, subject to a condition to ensure the spaces remain unallocated, the number and location of spaces would be acceptable. Given the reduced parking figure is accepted on the basis of the age of occupants, meaning they're less likely to require the use of a car, Condition 23 has been proposed. That restricts the age of the main occupant of the development to at least 60 years of age. The space has also been provided for up to 10 mobility scooters, along with a charging point, and 6 cycle spaces, well in excess of the borough standards, are also proposed. A construction method statement has been submitted by the applicant. Highways have confirmed that the document is well written and is acceptable, and Condition 11 is proposed to ensure the development is carried out in accordance with it. And there are a number of trees on site, including a line of conifers, you can see on the left-hand photo, protected under a TPO, and that forms the boundary between 7 and 9. The proposal requires the removal of a number of trees, including these protected trees. However, some of these trees are recommended to be removed on arboricultural grounds, and the conifers, despite being protected, don't make a significant contribution to the street scene, because as they're largely hidden from view, they're not particularly well planted, and they're not particularly good examples. It's possibly unclear as to why they were TPO'd in the first place. The site does have a significant number of existing trees along the boundary, including beech trees along the rear boundary. Boundary planting will be supplemented, and an arboricultural statement has been submitted to demonstrate that development could be accommodated on site without impact on the retained trees. The most important contribution to the amenity of the area is from the trees at the street frontage, you can see in the CGI. That's significant maple, oak and beech trees. They would all be retained and additional tree planting proposed on the frontage. A draft hard and soft landscaping plan has been submitted. This demonstrates a high quality landscaping scheme could be provided and conditions relating to further details, potential landscaping and tree protection measures are proposed. The Council's ecologist has confirmed no objection to the development, subject to a condition relating to clearance works. In relation to other issues, there's no pollution or contamination affecting the site, but a precautionary contamination condition is recommended. There's a watching brief proposed in relation to archaeology. There's also a condition proposed requiring submission and approval of an employment skills plan. The scheme is liable to provide affordable housing. However, in terms of on-site affordable, a separate block wouldn't be provided, would not be provided on site. And pepper potting wouldn't be possible given the management charges associated with schemes like this. In the circumstances, an off-site contribution has been accepted. This is the same approach as adopted at Candy Lodge last year, members may recall. Following a review of the applicant's viability appraisal, a financial contribution of £205,000 has been agreed with the applicant. If I could just draw members' attention to the update. Members requested further information relating to the required number of spaces were the scheme for an unrestricted C3 residential use. As I said, 25 parking spaces are proposed to serve the scheme. As a standard residential development, 33 spaces would be required. However, condition 23 limits this to sheltered accommodation for the elderly only, and the applicant advises that first-time purchasers are on average in their mid to late 70s. As such, parking demand is less than a standard residential development, and surveys of similar schemes indicate 15 parking spaces would be required. It's therefore considered that the 25 proposed is acceptable to serve the development, subject to condition 23, the age restriction. In addition, the development provides parking for mobility scooters, as I referred to earlier. Members also requested confirmation of the affordable contribution as a percentage. The sum equates to approximately 3%. A policy-compliant contribution would be significantly in excess of this, but the Council's Viability Advisor has come back to us and advised that a contribution over that 3, in addition to the SIL contributions, would make the development unviable. And finally, just turning to condition 25, details of the drainage system are actually required under condition 24. So the first part of condition 25 is an unnecessary duplication. In relation to groundwater, the required sampling has actually already been carried out and the data submitted for consideration by the Council's drainage officer. The officer agrees with the conclusion that the effect of the development on groundwater would be negligible and advises that condition 25 is no longer necessary and therefore recommends it be removed. Following the removal of condition 25, Chair, the application is recommended for approval subject to completion of the legal agreement and the remainder of the conditions as set out.
Okay, thank you, Justin. We'll now ask the only registered speaker on this item is Peter Tanner, the agent for the applicant. Good evening. Press the grey buttons on the microphone. Unfortunately, the light doesn't seem to be working, but the sound is.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman and members. I speak to you on behalf of the applicant, Renaissance Retirement Limited. Wokingham's older people strategy identifies that there will be a significant increase in the number of older people in the borough over the next 15 years, particularly in the proportion of the very elderly. The Council's adopted core strategy identifies that there will be a need for an additional 100 sheltered housing units to provide for that need. Accordingly, core strategy policy CP2 encourages planning permission for this specialised form of housing development. Older people choose to move to sheltered housing, usually prompted by a life-changing event, such as death of a spouse, or for reasons of health, such as a fall or hip replacement or declining mobility. Many are downsizing from a family home, seeking companionship, safety and security, and avoiding the worry of home maintenance and repair. This also releases under-occupied housing suitable for families back onto the local market. Whilst it is usual for councils to restrict the age of occupancy by planning permission to a minimum age of 60 or 65, the typical characteristics of a sheltered resident is a single or widowed female in their late 70s or older. From our experience, at least 75% of the apartments are likely to be occupied by single-person female households. These factors, together with the communal facilities, the emergency call system, and the services of a visiting house manager and the associated management charges, tend to be less attractive to the more active car-owning elderly. It is for these reasons that we find that elderly residents of our sheltered accommodation display much lower car ownership than the general elderly population. Typically on a scheme of this nature, we expect to provide only one parking space for every 2 apartments for residents and their visitors. However, mindful of the generally more affluent characteristics of elderly residents in the Wokingham area, we have purposely provided a much higher level of parking space provision by providing the 25 parking spaces, including 3 disabled parking spaces, and provision within the building for storage and charging of up to 10 mobility scooters. Based on our extensive experience of managing and operating sheltered housing, this will be more than adequate to serve the parking needs of not only the elderly residents, but also their visitors. The proposed building has been designed to be of traditional appearance, with the upper floor contained partially within the roof space. Arranged in 3 blocks linked by a single-storey communal residence lounge, the proposal reflects the general massing and rhythm of development along this part of Wiltshire Road. Your planning officer has confirmed that the proposal will not have any harmful overbearing impact on neighbouring properties, and the proposal retains the existing mature frontage and boundary trees, and proposing the planting of 19 trees within the landscape gardens to replace those overgrown conifers to be removed from the centre of the site. As shown by the computer-generated images...
Your time's up.
Right, thank you, sir.
Okay, if you just want another few seconds just to summarise, if there's a key...
No, sir, I was merely going to commend the proposal to you and invite you to accept your officer's recommendation.
You just managed to do.
Thank you.
Right, so there are no other registered speakers, and we'll come on to Malcolm as the local member in a moment, but just before we do, I just wanted to... When members attended a site visit and looked at the location on Friday morning, and certainly issues about high levels of car ownership in Wokingham were certainly in the forefront of our minds, and also the fact that many people are driving quite late into life. The applicant indicated, and I'd just like confirmation from that, because I was proposing that we change the condition that says that it should be occupied by at least one resident who would have to be over 60 for each dwelling, that would move that to 65. I take that
would be perfectly acceptable,
which I think would just move the age profile just a little further towards your typical age, and probably ensure that we have a little more certainty in terms of parking. Fine. Thank you. Malcolm.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I visited this site with the other members last week. All of that area has large sites and large buildings, and this new development is going to be a large building in 2 adjacent sites. It seems to fit in terms of the size and location and the design and quality. So I don't see any problem there. I think most of the car parking is underground, so that's going to be reasonable. I'm glad they have rather more parking spaces than the recommended minimum for them, because people do drive for much longer than they used to. And they don't necessarily get rid of their car just because they're retired. However, obviously there's just one gate for all of these people to come out, but bearing in mind their age and the type of property it is, I cannot imagine a convoy of 33 cars coming out together anyway, so small numbers coming out of that gateway, that corner, is all right. However, the gate is quite near a junction where Wiltshire Road comes up and meets Rectory Road. And during busy times there's a fair number of cars on speed. I'm wondering whether it's possible to maybe put a marking on the road or a sign outside that indicates there is an entrance to a property there. Or sometimes, as along the London Road, they put the words "keep clear" just in front of the traffic lights because there's an entrance to a house there. Something like that to make way, because otherwise they'll never be able to get out on a busy morning.
Okay, Chris, from the highways perspective, could you just comment on the access point there, please?
Yeah, in terms of the access, obviously the development's been reviewed as well as the access itself, and we don't draw there to be any real issues with it. In terms of visibility, it's sufficient, obviously, to the right of the access, obviously to the left it is slightly restricted as a result of the tree, but as a result of that, vehicles will be slowing on approach to the junction, and the conclusion's been made that actually we're sufficient that visibility.
You won't see the words outside, you don't think, or a sign indicating it's in?
No, I mean, most people, it wouldn't make a great deal. It wouldn't mean anything anyway to anybody.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, John?
Funny enough, most of the questions asked by Malcolm, mine was about the sight line. As you come out there to the right, it pretty well obscured, but I think you just answered that question.
That's correct, is it, in terms of the sight lines for the 30-mile-an-hour element of road there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've got this guidance has changed constantly. A lot over the last couple of years with DYB manning the streets, and Main Streets allows for a much lower visibility display. Sorry, Main Streets allows a much lower visibility display than what was previously required. I think with trimming back of the vegetation, I think things will be improved anyway, but as a result vehicles are slowing on approach to the junction and the visibility there is deemed to be acceptable.
Thank you. I saw a few members wince at the viability issues. Claire, could you provide some clarification? As in essence, here we have a situation where housing that should normally be contributing something towards affordable housing appears to be able to get away with contributing significantly less. I think it would be useful for all members if you could perhaps just explain a little bit of the viability and how that is independently assessed.
Yes, Chairman. The viability specifically is addressed on page 7 of the update sheet, just for members' attention. That sets out what would normally be required as part of this development. As Justin explained, the viability, the development is still liable, and therefore viability essentially hits on the affordable housing element of any scheme generally. In order to be compliant, there would be a requirement set out there, and only approximately 3% of this would be provided as, a total of 3% will be provided as part of this development, as opposed to the policy compliant 30% requirement. Just to let you know what we do when we get viability issues raised. We have an independent consultant that looks at all of the relevant information. They will look at the costing of the scheme, about the price of the land, the price of the development itself, and also what the viability is of the new development going forward. And they will come to a view as to what could be reasonable, taking on board what is an accepted level of profit required essentially by the banks, and they come up with what is reasonable and achievable as part of any viability assessment. And in this case they came up with a contribution of £2,005, which they felt that the development could sustain.
Okay. So can we just confirm that the person undertaking that viability assessment is contracted to do this for the council? Absolutely. And whatever fee is paid by the council. The applicant has no involvement in that. Is that correct? Other than having to be negotiated.
We actually try and seek, because it's outside of the normal application process, we try and seek money for that payment from the applicant, because we've argued that it's directly attributable. However, it's our consultant, they have no input into that process, it's totally independent, and the client is the council.
Thank you.
first of all, I tend to wince a bit when people talk about, 65 pushing 70. I think, still hail a party, I think, or hail anyway. A couple of things. I mean, I'm just going to return to this viability thing because it does annoy me, and people well know that it annoys me. And, I have a very simple principle: if you can't afford to do it, don't do it. We have a need for affordable housing in this borough, a great need throughout the whole borough. We've got people who, in my area, young people who can't find a house, and it really annoys me that we are allowing developers to get out of this, to make profit on what they're doing, which, there's two perfectly good houses there. They don't need to be demolished. We don't need this block of flats there. They can be elsewhere. And that's an aside comment. I've got no justification, but I just wanted to get it off my chest. One question I have, we've got a lot of mobility, or spaces for mobility scooters there. How do they get across the road to access the town centre? Because that's a dodgy road there, and I didn't see any crossings or anything there.
Yeah, there's a crossing on Wiltshire Road.
Sorry, say again?
There is a crossing on Wiltshire Road.
By the church.
By the church, further up.
So, just to confirm, there is a pedestrian crossing just a bit further up the road towards the church.
Thank you. And just to confirm that the trees at the rear of the boundary, are they going to be removed, or are they retained and replanted with 2-foot-high saplings or something? And can you also confirm that you mentioned a watching brief with the archaeology conditions, please? Thank you.
Chair, thank you. Chair, the trees at the rear boundary are largely retained and supplemented, and yes, just to confirm, a watching brief condition is proposed.
All right. Claire, you wanted to come
I
back
just want to say something
on the viability issue.
Absolutely, and I can understand how members feel about this. I think one of the key things here is, and this is really important, that the model of housing care here is our preferred housing care model as opposed to as part of the older person's housing strategy. So if an alternative model had been put forward, which such as residential care, there would have not been a requirement for affordable housing at all, because it would have fallen into a different use class. So I think that we need to be mindful that it does free up other residential accommodation. It also is our preferred requirement, and if they would have gone with a different type of model which would not have supported our preferred model, then there would have been no requirement for affordable housing anyway. So just to make you feel a bit better, Bob. Really.
No, I don't.
Chris.
Thank you, Simon. Yes, just one thing, and it follows on this question of the crossing the road at Wiltshire, the junction of Wiltshire Road. I'm concerned that there is a pedestrian crossing that's on the church, but there's a question of the desire line. Anyone who wants to go from this development, say, in a westerly direction along Rectory Road, I'd be concerned about or maybe you could perhaps comment on the safety. That is there going to be a sufficient land in the middle of that island for mobility scooters to go across there and then go west along the Rectory Road there?
Sorry, which island are you in?
There's a little triangle in the area.
At the junction.
Oh, at the junction. So anyone who wants to go from this development, if they're wanting to go in a westerly direction along Rectory Road, the desire line's a long way away from the crossing. What is the view about provision of safe crossing at that point?
There isn't really one for that point. In terms of accessibility, a study was undertaken as part of the application to obviously look at the accessibility of the town, and it was felt, accept your point in terms of there isn't an access right outside the door, but there usually isn't always an access where we might conveniently want them. So in terms of the accessibility report that was put forward as part of the application, it was deemed appropriate in terms of Waitrose on this side of town. You could obviously cross and go up, but for the other parts of the town there are restrictions for mobility scooters and obviously wheelchair users. But in general the report was accepted that you could get to the majority of those places, and it was intended there is going to be a concierge on site as well with a minibus, which obviously will be able to locate or to transport people from the development site.
Fine, so it is just a question then that there is the one crossing and that's the one that should be used.
That's the key one, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other members wishing to indicate to speak. So, members, we've had a site visit with a clear recommendation in front of us. We've seen that there's some minor changes in the members' update, and the point I made earlier on with changing condition 27 to reach age 65 rather than age 60. So, members, could you please indicate that you're prepared to support this application? And that is supported by 8 members. Bob, are you abstaining, or would you wish to refuse it?
I object.
So you agree. So that is carried. That application is carried by 8 votes to 1. So the application is approved. Thank you, members. Anybody for that application? Could I ask you, unless you want to stay for the rest of your to leave, please? Thank you. And we now move on to the proposed exception to the telephone mast at adjacent to St John's Ambulance in Church Road. And so just before we start, just to confirm again, most members of the planning committee attended a site visit to look at this on Friday morning of last week, and we viewed the site from within the close, and we also walked along Church Road and viewed it from beyond the church, and we went a bit further into the conservation area. So we're familiar with the location, the scale of the existing mast, so I think we can make an informed decision tonight. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application before us is a full application for the proposed upgrade and alteration works to the existing base station located adjacent to the St John's Ambulance Centre. The site is located within a motor development area of Woodley and is accessed from St John's Close. The existing monopole has a height of 17.3 metres with a width at the head frame of 1.2 metres. The apparatus on site includes 3 antennas, one equipment cabinet, and the site is bound by a 1.8 metre close boarded fence. The proposed replacement includes a monopole of 20 metres in height. There would be relocation of 3 existing antennas, 3 additional antennas, 2 dish antennas with a diameter of 300 millimetres installed at a height of 16 metres, 1 equipment cabinet which would be located within the existing cabinet, and associated works. Under permitted development, Part 16 Class A covers the rights for electronic communications code operators. The most relevant paragraph within the current application, which would be most relevant to the current application, is paragraph A1C for the replacement of masts. Paragraph BB reads that development is not available in the case of the alteration or replacement of an existing mast when the mast, excluding any antenna, would, when altered or be replaced at any given height, exceed the width of the existing mast at the same height by more than 1/3. This is the only criterion that the proposal does not meet. So just an example, when compared with the existing increase in width, there's only at 2 points where the mast does not comply with the GPDO. That is at a height of 16 metres where the 2 proposed dish antenna are proposed to be installed, and also at a height of 5.5 metres where it touches just above the ridge of the adjacent building. The applicant could, without planning permission, replace the existing mast with a 20-metre high monopole without planning permission. So we would have no control over that, and that increase in height could go forward.
So just let's get absolute clarity on that. So the addition of the 2 30 centimetre, which is typical dinner plate sized antennae at the higher level, and the slight increase in width above the ridge of the St John's Ambulance is what, if you like, prevents the applicant simply just going ahead and doing this without planning permission.
That's correct,
Right,
yeah.
so it's purely those 2 points that require them to make planning application. Thank you.
Just for avoidance of doubt, a lot of objections have been received in terms of the site being in a conservation area. It's not in a conservation area. The slightly shaded dark pink area in the middle is the conservation area, and the site lies outside of this area. The views from the conservation area towards the site are quite limited. They are screened with the existing high trees that are located adjacent to Church Road. There's only one clear viewpoint of the mast from the conservation area, and the other ones, like I said, are largely screened. The proposal would provide new fast 4G data and improve the 2G and 3G coverage for existing customers of 2 operators. So this is a site which is shared. The increased height would avoid the need for new sites and offer continuous coverage between 4G cells, which in turn would keep the number of sites within the local area to an absolute minimum. Alternative sites and designs have been considered, however, to ensure that the site is future-proof and effectively transmits signals without obstruction, this option is considered to be the most optimum solution. An ICNAP certificate has been submitted to show that there is compliance in regards to health. Paragraph 19 of the MPPF states that significant weight should be placed on the need to support economic growth. The MPPF is quite clear in promoting improvements to the existing base stations to support an economy which is fit for the 21st century. Paragraph 46 is quite clear in stating that local planning authorities must determine applications on planning grounds only. They should not seek to prevent competition between different operators, question the need for telecommunication system, or determine health safeguards if the proposal meets the International Commission guidelines for public exposure. And just to finish, there's a couple of photos of the site itself and then views around the conservation area. Quite clearly, standing on Church Road, you can't see the existing mast. As you do go closer, there is a brief view of the mast just above the church hall, I believe it is, and that's the view at the front of the St John's Ambulance Centre.
Okay. Thank you, Pedro. Right, on to speakers. Firstly, we've got Richard Delinsky from Woodley Town Council. Good evening. Welcome. It's the first time you've spoken to a planning committee, is it?
Yes, it is.
Right, okay. We'll be gentle with you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. Okay. I hope that no council would approve any planning application that would blight a community that's expressed more than a passing concern over this application, and in support I'm going to add a further consideration. Everyone is fully aware, including the telecommunication industry, of the impact that 4G has on Freeview. Both have similar wavelengths. Pay-for-view services must be rubbing their hands with glee at the prospect of yet more properties blighted with no free-to-air signals. Not exactly fair when the government made it clear in the digital rollout that every household has a right to Freeview. Filters are only partially effective. Just ask the residents of Church Mews, Woodley. They also live in the shadow of the proposed development. They have intermittent television reception despite installing filters. What this planned upgrade will bring is more disruption, something that residents of North Swindon thought of successfully in October of this year. An application by Vodafone to roll out a further 3 4G masts was turned down by Swindon Borough Council, not only because of the visual impact on the community, but also that alternative solutions were not explored. The government planning portal provides useful guidance, in particular with reference to the environment. I'm going to quote something from that. It reads, redevelopment that would lead to poorer environmental solution. In the first instance, the guidelines recommend that the developer seeks to share an existing mast in the area to minimise the impact on the environment. Examining this application, I cannot see evidence of this having been done, or indeed any other solution explored. I know the mast already hosts 4G, and it would appear that another carrier wants to use the site to host their signals. Given that Vodafone is aware of the disruption caused by masts, especially in residential areas, it leaves me wondering why, in this case, Vodafone has not sought an alternative solution. So on behalf of Woodley Town Council, I'm asking the members and the officers to consider the impact on this further upgrade on the lives of the residents of St John's Close and indeed the neighbouring communities. Hopefully you will conclude this planning application is unnecessary, disruptive and intrusive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now invite Richard Beasley, who's objecting, I believe.
Is it acceptable to hand you a few
Yeah, of course.
photographs?
Don't mind skipping one. Thanks.
It's 3 on each side.
First, we could clarify, are you speaking as a single objector or are you speaking on behalf of other residents?
I am speaking on behalf of residents. I speak on behalf of residents of St John's Close, the trustees of St John's Church, local residents of the surrounding area and 169 petition signatories. The new mast being 20 metres high will dominate our skyline. Along with the additional antennas, the mast will be clearly seen towering above St John's Church and add to what is already an imposing structure. Vodafone have used their squatters' rights to build by stealth from the original 12 metres to 15 metres, up to the current 17 metres. Surely it's time to put a stop to this incremental damage to the local environment. If this application referred to the installation of a new mast on this previously unused site, we would hope and presume that the council would reject it due to its proximity to the Woodley Green Conservation Area. The applicants themselves have said that the site is not suitable because of the tree line to the south interfering with coverage. Given that trees are likely to grow taller, does this mean that we have a larger mast sometime in the future? This is a golden opportunity to do the right thing to remove the mast from St John's Close and upgrade an existing mast on a less intrusive site, or even putting a new one in within one of the local industrial areas. We and those closest to the mast have been very disturbed by noise pollution emitting from the base station. Having to listen to this high-pitched pulsing noise at night time has an effect on residents' quality of sleep and health. With the alterations and more technology added, we fear even more noise pollution. Do we not have the right for a good night's sleep? The new 4G technology is used because it has a better building penetration. This along with the doubling of mobile phone traffic as companies share the mast is of great concern to the residents of St John's Close, and we are fearful of the possible health concerns. Vodafone have guidelines to check how close their masts are to local schools. This in itself shows uncertainty and doubt, but what about the children who sleep with the mast at the bottom of their garden, at the bottom of the garden of the close? This is very real worry to us. We accept that it is not the role of the planning officers or the councillors on the planning committees to consider the health risks, nor to consider the validity of health issues or their personal beliefs in those issues. However, it is their responsibility to consider the loss of amenity, which is a very valid planning issue, and it is clear that the worrying and being fearful about the implications to one's health from mobile phone masts, especially if the mast is clearly visible from one's home, is going to affect the person's quality of life, thus leading to a loss of amenity. Irrespective of whether the danger is perceived or real, the proposal has already caused a considerable amount of anxiety, worry and stress. These ill effects will be intensified if the application were to go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I invite James Kane, the applicant?
Good evening, Chair. I am the agent for the applicant and I've read the officer's report and all objections. Your professional planning officer has produced a well-balanced report which takes account of all material considerations and results in a recommendation for approval. Your officer has done all in her power to ask questions of my client's technical team regarding the height, regarding whether the height could be reduced, whether the pole could be redesigned, what alternative sites have been explored, and also noise issues. In response, my client has provided coverage plots and technical reasons why the design proposed is the minimum that can achieve 4G coverage of the surrounding area. If there was a design of lesser impact that could have been found, then we would have put it forward. As your officer explained before, a smaller width of pole would fit in the GPDO rights. This is a key upgrade site. At present, it only provides 3G coverage for Vodafone customers, so there's no existing 4G on the site. The scheme in front of you will allow enhanced 2G, 3G and 4G coverage for Vodafone and O2 customers. 4G cells are large, and a constraint in this site is the tree cover to the south. In order to cover the full cell area and clear the trees to transmit without obstruction, a height increase is required. A substantial 4G coverage is expected in the area after the upgrade, which will lead to an increase in capacity. This is an established cell, and congestion is highly likely if the proposed upgrade is not undertaken, which will continue with a poor connection for customers. There are no other existing sites in the search area for a site share for both Vodafone and Telefonica. Any alternative site should ideally be within 200 metres of the existing site to replicate its coverage, plus provide new 4G coverage. A standalone site could not be found due to the dense residential use in this area, and also no alternative rooftops in the search area could be found, which would enable the minimum height required to be achieved. Shrouding of the antennas is explored at the request of the case officer. Due to the large size of the proposed head frame, a shroud of that scale could not be designed to fit over the antennas, unfortunately. A redesign to a slimmer pole with shrouded antennas was explored. However, this would have resulted in a drop to less antennas. Since this is a high capacity site, this would cause capacity issues, resulting in coverage gaps and requiring a new site to soak up additional capacity requirements. Your conservation officer has no objection to the proposal, and the site is outside of the conservation area in any event. Therefore, we are of the opinion that the following points should be considered in your planning judgment. 1, this is an established cell since 1991. 2, the upgrade will enable better coverage and capacity. 3, the height increase is only 2.7 metres, which should be considered reasonable in this instance. 4, that views to and from the conservation area are well screened by trees. 5, that this proposal is wholly compliant with planning policy. It is a site share and will support economic growth and social cohesion in the area. Nearly there. This proposal will mean that a separate standalone mast will not be required, and the applicant has responded to requests from the officer throughout the determination period. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Keith, as board member, did you wish to speak?
Yes, please.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to start off that I'm extremely confused because within the last 12 months, an organisation called At 800 delivered a postcard to every house in St John's Close, which was related to the impact of upgrading to 4G would have on their TV screens and Freeview. Either somebody was being anticipating the outcome of this, which I'm sure isn't the case, or something got slightly wrong. So residents believe, and I believe, that 4G is already on there. For me, the key issue... Sorry.
I think we actually heard from the agent that it does already have 4G on the mast. Is that correct?
No, no 4G, no.
So there's something gone wrong here.
Okay, right, okay.
For me, the key issue is the visual impact. As you saw on one of the slides, by the very fact that this application is before you, is a clear indication within the planning process that such an upgrade can have a serious impact on surrounding residents. If it did not, then it would have come under the classification of permitted development as described on the same page, so unless we wouldn't be here. It's been mentioned on the presentation and within the report that the fallback situation is they could do it without a planning application if they put a slimmer pole up. But I would suggest that that is not a rationale or a reason for approving just because an applicant can do some other option. I absolutely think that is not something to consider. It's clear from the documentation that there is a 16% height increase. It's also clear that there's an intensification at the top of the pole of the new pole, with a doubling of the antennas from 3 to 6, plus the 2 dish antennas. That will make a huge visual impact at the top of this pole. In both these cases, you knew exactly what was there before and what will be there if the application is approved. It's all well documented. However, another dimension has been, what I consider, slipped in without any data to review. And it's actually been mentioned here for the first time. And I refer to the width of the pole. For the very first time in any documentation, there is, as far as I can see, there's a mention that the new pole will have a larger width than the existing mast. How much wider has not been specified, but you can look at the drawings that suggest going from a single pole to a pole with 3 distinct sections. The widest of them is at the bottom and then is stepped down over these 3 sections. So not only do you have intensification at the top of this new pole, you also have it at the bottom and middle through this extra width. The slide that actually showed you where it exceeded the 2 areas, that is the first piece of information that's been related to this. And I actually think that is remiss of the council to not actually provide that information, because it is germane to the visual impact.
Your time's up.
Okay, so can I just very quickly make a final sentence and then? I believe this, Conservation Order says it's going to be slightly visible. It's true if it's only a single pole, or even a pole with the existing 3 antennas on. But this is not proposed here. The most significant intensification is at the top, with a large increase in the mass at the top of this pole. And it was quite telling. All the pictures you saw, particularly the one that was the most visible, cut the top off. You just saw the pole. That's unfortunate. And on that basis, I really do believe that you should refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, before we come on to it, can we just get some clarification on issues relating to the pole? Could we just clarify the increase in the width or the diameter of the pole, please, at the various sections?
Yep. So between the existing pole and the proposed pole, at the head frame, which is right at the top, there's only an increase of 0.3 of metres, so about 30 centimetres. That would be the increase there. The largest increase, which I've said would be in these 2 locations, at 5.5 metres, which is the bottom circle here, the increase in width would be 60 centimetres. So the proposed...
So it's 3 feet increase in diameter.
In diameter, yeah.
At that point.
At that point. And then the increase in width at the top, which is because of the dish antennae proposed.
Okay, thank you. Right, members, before we come on to hear your contributions on this, just to summarise then that clearly there is a distinction here between, we're not considering a brand new mast at a new location, we're considering an extension to an existing mast. As we've heard from the case officer, there will be opportunities to make changes to this mast. It's not what the applicant wants to do, that could be done without the requirement of planning permission. We've heard about loss of amenity, we've heard about the visual impact that it will have, and we've also heard about concerns regarding the noise from the base station. Virgil, do we know if we've checked with environmental health? Because I didn't see there was any mention in the summary of the residents' concerns about the issue about noise from the base station. Are we aware whether there have been any issues?
We've not consulted with environmental health, right. But I did raise this with the agent, who said that this, the existing antenna and the mast should not be emitting any noise unless there was a fault. So I had this confirmed on 2 occasions from them, and they advised that they'll be sending an engineer on site to make sure that there's been no noise coming from the site.
Thank you. And again, just to confirm that the actual increase in the physical height, although we agree that bulk is enlarged in places, is 2.7 metres.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So Bob, I think you were the first to indicate.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say I didn't attend a site visit, but I did live just down the road for over 20 years, so I do know the site very well. At one point I was wondering when I was looking at the same application, because one of the points that was made by Woodley Town Council that this didn't meet the requirement of sharing masts. Well, we've heard that this is being shared by Vodafone and Telefonica now, which is definitely, in my mind, sharing a mast. And I'm struggling with this because the fundamental question is, does it meet the government guidelines? Does it meet radiation standards? And does it cause problems with 4G, with Freeview? Now, I live very close to a 4G mast, and I've got no problems with Freeview at all. So I'm puzzled over that. We could go up to 20 metres anyway without planning permission. It's just a small bulk at the top, that an increase of 30 centimetres, which in a diameter is not huge. The objector was mentioning that the view from his window is sort of obstructing his view, but we've heard the mast has been there since 1991, and my immediate question to the objector would be, when did he buy the house? Was it there when he bought the house?
I think, Bob, in fairness, it is apparent that the mast was there before any of those houses were built. In close. Sorry?
Not this size back.
No, I was about to add that before you interrupted me. But clearly it is extended to 12.5 metres, and then it's extended a second time, and now there's a proposal for at least a third time. So it's obviously having a cumulative impact. So yes, people did buy houses with a mast there, but it was 12.5 metres, and obviously it's if this is approved, it's going to be 20 metres, which is a significant increase.
Thank you.
John.
Thank you, Chairman. I know we're not supposed to consider any technical aspects of it, but if there is a problem with the televisions, it is a loss of amenity. And I'd be interested to find out why we haven't looked at that with the planning application.
Okay, well, unless I'm mistaken, the summary of the residents' objections does not include any reference to concerns about interruption to television. Is that correct?
No concerns of this regard have been raised before today.
I'm afraid we have to base this decision on the information that we have, and none of the residents have raised concerns in the previous 12 weeks about the impact on the television signal. That's not been raised an issue. I don't think it's really a matter we can start to discuss now, because I don't think anybody around this table or anybody in the audience is in a position to give us a clear answer, yes or no, on that.
I only asked the question because it was brought up.
Yeah, I understand, but I don't think it's something that we can answer. Chris Barron?
Thank you. It appears that most of this planning application can be implemented without getting planning application accepted through the General Permitted Development Order in 2015. First of all, I want to check what we actually can consider as planning matters, and the three matters raised are increases in noise, and as John's just said, the interference with Freeview through 4G, and the height of the mast. Are these matters we can talk about?
I'm convinced that issues about television reception are not an issue for the planning committee. There is legislation that covers matters of interference with television and radio signals, and that comes under the Telecommunications Act, but it's not part of planning. So if there's a problem with that, it's not a planning issue, it's an issue that the applicant has to resolve, the residents have to resolve with the appropriate authorities. I'm not avoiding the issue, but if we were to say it might interfere with television signals and refused it, you know what's going to happen when we go to appeal.
Yes, I'm asking for clarity.
Yeah, so, fair.
Okay, I think, Chairman, if I just clarify, Peter, would you mind just going back to the slide with both on there, with both the masts proposed and the existing? Right, so I think that maybe we can flip to this is what we've got there at the moment, and this could be increased to the same height as proposed without needing planning permission, as you've heard. And the proposal is this one here, and I think that What members really need to assess is whether or not the increase in the width of the actual mast itself, the pole, and the increase as a result of the dishes, is that impact so significant to justify refusing this application? Now that's on the back of looking at what's already there, A, and 2, looking at what can be done without needing planning permission. We've already heard tonight about Oxford Road and the fallback position and the need to be able to demonstrate harm on the back of anything over and above that fallback position. So I think that's the question members need to ask themselves, whether or not they feel that harm is so significant to residential amenity or to visual amenity as to justify refusal of the application. And you've had the committee report from officers put before you, and officers' view is it's not that significant to justify refusal.
Okay. Can I question again? You had 2 other points as part of your reasons.
Well, I've got one other point. I'm slightly confused about what the width increases. We're talking about the antennae, are we here? The width increases. And if we are on page 70, it seems to suggest you can increase the width by up to 1/3 without requiring planning permission. So what actually is the percentage increases? If it's only just over 1/3, that surely isn't sufficient to refuse the application. But we haven't got that figure.
I think it's the cumulative increase. It's a cumulative increase. This is not the first time the mast has been extended.
Okay, so going back to the beginning, what is the percentage increase?
I think Pooja might be able to clarify.
I don't have the percentage increase, but like I said before, at a height of 5.5 metres, the increase will be about 60 centimetres. So that will be
2 feet.
Yeah.
In circumference.
In
diameter.
In diameter. And then the other increase would be at the top of the monopole, well, not at the top, just where those 2 dish antennae are. The increase there would be from, so at the top circle, that would be the other increase that we would be assessing. So the first would be the bottom, which would be an increase of 60 centimetres, and at the top, which would be an additional increase of about 80 centimetres in width. But that's including the mast and both dish antenna that we proposed.
Right, but it does say it needs to be an increase of at least 1/3, so we must know what the original width was to calculate that this is more than 1/3 greater than the original width. So what was the original width?
I mean, if I may, I think that the best indication here is the 2 plans we've shown, and that's what's there, and that's an adequate. We can clearly show from there what is actually on the site, and the next column is what's proposed. If you bear with me, I can quite happily stay off the plans and give you an exact difference between where we are with that. Is that more comfortable?
It must be at least 1/3, otherwise we can't possibly refuse it.
I think I don't know actually, PG. When we approved, when we received this application, was it because the telecoms operator had measured it all and come to the view that they needed? Or did you?
No, I had to calculate that myself.
Okay, so if we are satisfied, it doesn't comply because of that requirement. Do you want me to measure it off?
Well, if it's just over 1/3, you can't refuse it if it's 33.5%.
Okay. Are there any other members wishing to speak on this item?
What is the...
Sorry, you wish to speak?
What is the width of the existing antenna at both of those heights, and what is the width of the new antenna?
Okay. Can we again come to that? I think we had that initially, but the width of the top antenna currently as proposed.
So the width of the existing antenna is 1.2 metres, and the proposed would be 1.5 metres, which is an increase of 25% only.
The pole. The pole you said was 60 centimetres higher, 1.30 centimetres higher up there. What's the existing size of the pole?
The existing size of the pole, if you can see, it's wider at the bottom. So here, at the height of 5.5 metres, the width is 40, in diameter, it's 40 centimetres. What they're proposing in this is the width of 5.5 metres would be 1 metre, so it would be an increase of 60 centimetres.
But at 5.5 meters, they wouldn't be able to see that much anyway. Distance.
So we just have to 1 metre. So the principal increase in width is at the ridge level of the St John's ambulance and below.
So they probably wouldn't really see most of that. It's the higher level.
The nature of the mast, by its very nature, it's a slightly tapering shape towards the top.
Visual acuity changes based on the distance.
Michelle, use the mic.
Sorry. Visual acuity changes on the distance, so that most likely they would not be able to actually perceive the distance, the difference of 30 centimeters at 20 meters high. That would be more than the average visual acuity of an eagle or something in this order.
Right. So, did we manage to get some scaling off?
I'm struggling with the aspect change.
Yeah, sure. Let's get the facts correct before we just bear with us, please. Excuse me, everybody. Just call back to order, please. Thank you.
Yeah, we've just checked it. Sorry, it didn't seem quite right. I think there's a slight mistake's been made. It's actually 40 at the moment. It's going to just over 55, so that there is an increase of just over a third. So it's only just over at that point over what is permitted development.
Okay. So, just members, if we just clarify then. So we've covered some of the issues. The key issue has been here, I think, that what the applicant is seeking to do is only just beyond what they could do with permitted development. But it is beyond that, which is why we're considering it now. And you have to consider whether what is being asked here that is slightly over what they could do under permitted development is sufficient grounds to either support the application or refuse it. Firstly, we have a clear application recommendation in front of us. Firstly, I would ask the question, is there any member wishes to propose an alternative proposal to the one that's in front of us, i.e. to refuse the application as we're seeking? I see nobody indicating for that. So without further ado, then we will go straight on to the recommendation in front of us, which is the recommendation that is on page 68. I just have one issue just to check there before we take this to the vote. Because this is a controversial matter and because it has had a number of increases, are we allowed to restrict any further increases whatsoever? We can't put sort of an issue on here that says any further increases automatically must come to planning committee. So they can still continue, if they've chosen to in the future, to make further minor changes to this mast under the current telecom regulations. Is that correct?
Yes,
right.
We can't take plans, in my view, we can't take community development rights away from this.
Because they're determined
essentially anything now, given where we've got to, anything now would need to be higher or wider. We've already established that it would need permission anyway.
All right, okay, thank you very much. So members, there are no changes to the recommendation on page 68. The members' update doesn't add any material information to that. So could you please indicate whether you're prepared to support this application? That is unanimously supported, so that is approved. Thank you, members. People who are here for that application, you're welcome to stay, but otherwise could you leave so that we can get on to the final application? Members, everybody please, right, discussion. We now get on to the final item on the agenda, which again is a site that we visited on Friday morning in Forest Road, Pikes Farm Cottages. We had a look at the site and were very much made aware of the presence of the proximity of parts of the motorway network, rather than the sound of you here. So, Dan, you're going to take us through this one? Straight across to you.
Chairman, members, what you have in front of you here is a household application for the proposed erection of a two-storey side and rear extension at 1 Pikes Farm Cottages. So the application dwelling, circled in red there, forms one part of 2 semi-detached cottages, which are located at the end of Forest Road, adjacent to the A329M to the bottom. The application site is classified as open countryside, and is also outside of the development boundary, so therefore core strategy policy CP11 applies. As you can see from the aerial photograph in front of you, the site backs onto open fields and open countryside towards the southeast. The proposal is for a 2-storey side and rear extension protecting south towards the A329M, which goes up there, that way. As you can see. So that's towards the motorway, the extension will come down that way. This slide shows the existing elevations. The front elevation to the top left is the one that fronts Forest Road. The front and the bottom side elevation are the ones that are visible from public viewpoints, albeit at the end of Forest Road, which isn't a through road anymore. This shows the proposed elevations, so how the dwelling would appear if it was approved. As you can clearly see, the front elevation is significantly wider in the street scene there. Going on to the original floor plans. So CP11 relates to the original building. This diagram shows the floor plans of the original house, as it says as it was first built or as it stood on 1st July 1948. So this is the extent of the original dwelling for the purposes of core strategy policy CP11. As you can see in this slide, this is the property as it currently exists. The bits shaded in red are existing extensions. Planning permission was granted for a 2-storey extension on the 20th of July 1960, and this was implemented. And more recently, a single-storey extension, the living room there, was built without planning permission, likely permitted development. Moving on to the proposed floor plans. This shows what would be proposed if we were to approve the dwelling. So that would result in a total footprint increase of over 200% on the original. So that brings us quite nicely to the main issues, the principle of development. As you can see there, core strategy policy CP11 states, in order to protect the separate identity of settlements and maintain the quality of the environment, proposals outside of development limits will not normally be permitted except where, in the case of residential extensions, does not result in inappropriate increases in the scale, form, or footprint of the original building. So I think the question here, in terms of principle, is a 200% increase in footprint inappropriate? And is the increase resulting in inappropriate divergence from the original form and footprint of the original dwelling? Or do the material considerations of the site justify a departure from the development plan? Other main issues are in terms of the actual character and appearance of the extension. So you can all read there, the Borough Design Guide R23 states that it should be well designed, respond positively to the original building, contribute positively to the local character, and relate well to neighbouring properties. It's the view that the proposed extension is substantially wider than the existing dwelling, resulting in a disproportionate addition which would detract from the character of the original building. Other issues that were raised, parking provision is considered acceptable. It's not considered to harm residential amenity in terms of overlooking or overbearing issues. Subject to conditions, there would be no ecology concerns. We would require a mitigation survey to do with Great Bristol News that came as part of the process. And in terms of noise, I know that was mentioned. Because it's an already existing residential use, we wouldn't be creating any new receptors, so it would be unreasonable to refuse it on those grounds.
Thanks, Dan. So, Wayne, come to you first. Excuse me, sorry, we have one person ready to speak. Mark Leadow. Sorry, I get carried away with myself. Your agent for the applicant.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you for allowing me to address the Planning Committee on behalf of the applicant. Plainly, the Council's planning policies are important and guide you on decision making. There used to be policies which set out a limit to extensions in terms of percentage increase in volume. These policies have gone, and we are left with those which require that decisions are made by reference to the design and visual effect of the proposed extensions. It's a matter of proper judgment. It follows that in applying policy CP11, an extension can only be inappropriate if it is of an awkward or insensitive design, or that it visually harms the rural landscape. It is important to note that the original dwellings here were in fact 3 properties. Numbers 2 and 3 have been combined, and the application building is number 1, and that's on your update sheet. The result is that the application building is very small and cannot reasonably accommodate the applicant's family. In practical terms, it is a 2-bedroom property, since the additional space, annotated as bedroom 2, is simply too small for a bed. What is proposed is a modest extension to allow for a 3rd bedroom and enlarged living room. The annotations on the plan referring to bedrooms 4 and 5 are in fact wrong. They are too small to be bedrooms and will offer storage space. When you consider the visual impact of this proposal, it's wholly inappropriate and misleading simply to refer to percentage increases. This is outside of the policy requirements, and the proper approach is to judge the visual impact of the extension in its context. The site is contained by trees, as you'll have seen on your site visit, and at the end of a rural lane. It is next to the motorway slip road, and the extension, which is of some 7 metres in width, should be seen in the context of the whole of the building. And I'd urge you to look at the plan P4, which is on page 93 of the agenda. When viewed in this context, the extension actually has very little visual effect from any public vantage point and could not, by any reasonable judgment, be considered to be harmful to the wider landscape or the setting of settlements. As such, I suggest it would not offend policy CP11. Turning to design, the proposal entirely accords with policies of the Borough Design Guide and the Design Guide for Hurst. In simple terms, it's subservient to the original building and has features and materials to match the existing. Finally, I refer you to the fact that the previous extensions to this dwelling were undertaken some 55 years ago and related to the whole of the building as 3 separate dwellings. There is no base date for the original building, and it is reasonable to consider this proposal afresh. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now, as board member.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for clarity, the planning history detailed on page 84, the only relevant part of that is the first part, which is...
Mark, turn the microphone off,
Sorry, yeah, I was saying the only relevant part of that is the part where the 2-storey side extension was, as the agent has said, was to all 3 properties, and the last piece, which was the application in 2014, which was withdrawn. The other 3 references there don't apply to this particular property. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm super protective of Hurst and CP11. On this occasion, it's one of those occasions where I don't think this is creating any harm whatsoever. I mean, for those of you who were there on the visit on Friday, and you heard the traffic noise and how close we are to the link road of the M4 and the A329, I really don't think this is a consideration and we are creating any harm whatsoever. And if you drive down the Forest Road, you only have to have a look at what's been done to some of those properties and how they've been extended. And I think this is complementary to the actual property. I don't think it goes against any design. I think it's well in keeping, and I think that the size of the plot is big enough to take it. And I would urge the committee to go against the officer's proposal.
Right, well, you hold that point and give consideration to an alternative proposal, because you need to make an alternative proposal if you want us to consider that. In the meantime, let's hear what's from the other members. So John and then Chris Singleton.
I did attend the site, and I would concur that it stands in a quite substantial plot. What I'd like to know is what is the increase over what is actually there now, not what was built back in 1732, but what is actually there now.
And do you have those volume increases? Or
47% it was worked out as over what's existing at the moment.
okay. Do you have any other points, John?
No, that's
okay.
the end.
Chris Wood.
Thank you, Simon. The noise is very evident, of course, from being there, and I'm just wondering whether would it be appropriate if we approve this to actually have a condition there in terms of the double glazing that's installed, that we could actually insist on thinking about the future for the building there, that there's thicker glass to try and reduce the noise level in the new part of the house.
I think that's something that's going to be probably beyond our remit in as much as that it's the applicant's choice. These are not new market houses being built, such as at the site we looked at, the old bakery site, where there's going to be a significant amount of transport noise associated with lorries coming and going all night. Obviously, there are lorries coming and going all night at this location, but a little further away. I think in this case it would be entirely, if we were to approve it, it would be entirely up to the applicant to decide whether they wanted to go to the potential increased expense of acoustic glazing. Because certainly we can't require that, but it was my impression that the applicant was doing this in order to improve their standard of living, as opposed to being a developer selling a property on Stratford.
Right, thank you.
Can't restrict that. Sorry.
Right, thank you. I have to say I didn't go on the site visit, but I have been in the vicinity, and I do appreciate the noise of the motorway there is excessive. But it was my understanding that the noise doesn't make any difference when we're protecting the countryside. So it's something that we can't take into consideration. But I would say on a positive note, our MP John Redwood and Councillor Norman Yorgeson and other residents have got a lot of effort in lobbying the Highways Agency, and we expect to get some mitigation on that noise, which will make it a lot nicer for the residents to live there.
5% reduction.
Okay.
5%.
Okay. Other members wishing to speak on this? Okay. Well, a few comments I'll make then. Obviously, there was a reference to public viewpoints. I think the only public viewpoint is the road, which ended at that property. You'll recall at the site visit that as we were about to leave, the resident of number 3 arrived and came across to ask what all these people were doing outside her house, and I think quite noticeably told us that they supported the application. I understand they're the only people to have commented on it. Seahurst Parish Council hasn't raised any concerns about it either. Clearly, we've also heard from the agent that gone are the days when there used to be a guideline of 50% increase of dwellings in the countryside, and that 50% was of course from the host dwelling, and we're hearing this is a 47% increase from the current dwelling, which has already been large. But there are several factors I think that may mitigate that. One is that clearly this is a very small dwelling in the first place, and normally the council takes a view, Claire, correct me if I'm wrong, that very small dwellings we tend to look more favourably at increases in size sometimes than very big dwellings. The other issue relates to the scale and the location of the plot. It's a very large plot. The other issue I think I'm surprised no one has raised is the fact that this was originally a terrace of 3 cottages and frankly is now unbalanced by the fact that number 3 bought number 2. So you've got a somewhat unbalanced property, and certainly looking at the plans, whilst it is we all acknowledge it is quite a large increase, it is subservient to the main dwelling. The ridge height is clearly set down and it's set back. And I think both of those diminish the impact. The other point I just wanted to make was that, if I can read my own writing, as I just read, is the harm in terms of the rural landscape. Now, sometimes we've heard from inspectors that the countryside is there to be protected in itself. And I also note the comments that we've heard about noise and whether noise is or not a factor to consider. Certainly, I believe personally that the site is its nature, its countryside nature, is somewhat diminished by the presence of the motorway noise, which is clearly a very intrusive level of noise. See what you've got to say, Michelle.
Well, considering what problems we've had even today trying to get affordable homes for people, I think that having a home and having the ability to expand your home to the point to have all your family there is a good idea. I think this should be overturned, and I think it should be allowed, personally.
John and then Chris.
I would concur that I think it's the best use of that land, to be quite honest with you, because you wouldn't choose to have a picnic sitting in the gym.
Chris?
The principle here is in protecting the countryside is the encroachment. So in itself, it may not do any visible harm, but it is an extension, and it's eating away at the countryside. And I would remind members that when we had the application at Heathlands Road to replace garages with a fairly small building, we did refuse it because it was an encroachment into the countryside. However, I didn't attend the site visits, so I'll leave it to members to judge.
Just to point out the Heathlands one was also a site that was super constrained by the presence of a large number of TPO trees on the site, which did have a significant factor on it. That is not a constraint that we face with here. So anyway, so members, we have a proposal in front of us. Does anyone wish to make an alternative proposal?
I propose that we accept the application as it is in front of us.
And I second that.
I'll second that. We'll put that to the vote. If this was a successful proposal, clearly we will need to set some conditions. How will we go about doing that there?
I can't suggest the conditions with me if you want to vote.
Ah, right, okay.
Do you want to just outline what they're related to?
So it would be a standard.
Sorry, members, this requires your attention. Sorry.
Standard full permissions, 3 years condition on there.
Sorry.
So standard condition in terms of timing. Condition relating to materials would also be on there. A condition relating to approved plans and details. A fourth condition relating to accordance with the mitigation strategy supported in support of the application for Great Crested Newts, which was requested by our ecologist, and then a BAT informative. That would be what I would suggest.
You could confirm that this is obviously well below the sill requirements in terms of...
It is below the sill requirements, yes.
Okay. And I would assume that as the immediate and only neighbour is supporting the application, I suspect there wouldn't be a need to have a restriction on working hours, because I got the impression that the neighbours would cooperate on such a matter to avoid inconvenience. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that correct? Thank you. Okay. Okay. So we need some specific wording for this. Claire, could you help us with that?
Sorry, Chairman, I missed what you asked me.
I think we need to have a reasons for approval, just as we would have reasons for approval. Could you suggest something?
Chairman, I think yes, through. So I think what members are saying.
Sorry.
The reason for refusal put forward, Chairman, in the officer's report is one of the countryside reasons in terms of the scale, form and footprint and the impact of that on the open countryside. I think members have clearly said that they don't feel that or some members have said that they don't feel that there is sufficient harm given the location which is bound by the motorway, given the fact that there is no through route, and they feel that the impact on the character of the area as a result of the additional built form would not be significant in order to refuse the application.
Right, so members, we've had the proposal put forward by the member for Hurst, and I think John, I think you seconded it. So members, could you firstly indicate whether you're prepared to support the proposal to overturn the officer's recommendation and allow this application? Could those wishing to support it please indicate? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is carried quite clearly. So therefore that is approved. Thank you, members. I assume the others are you wishing to go against, or are you planning to abstain? Just for clarity. Abstain.
I was against.
You were against, and I was against. So it's fine. So that is approved. Members, that is the end of the committee meeting.